Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's class to Winsor & Newton, I Love You a Latte. My name is Tim DePack, and I'm from Winsor & Newton, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm being joined by Mandy Peltier, who will be our artist instructor for today's class, and Mandy will be taking today's class by providing information about the products being used in this class and showing you how to perform some of her favorite watercolor painting techniques and creating this cup of coffee or latte using watercolor paint from the Winsor & Newton Cotman Watercolor Sketcher Box set. She'll also give you a sneak peek at some of her upcoming classes. I'll provide the link for you in the chat if you wish to sign up for these classes. As we begin, we'll also put in the chat on the side a link for you to download the sketch if you haven't done so already for your use. Also, upon completion of this class, you will receive a survey in your email inbox. Please let us know what you thought of the class, how we did, and if there's any particular topics that you'd like to see Mandy perform in the future during one of her classes. Also, as Felicia had mentioned to you, that the class is being recorded, and within 24 hours from now, you'll be able to replay this and watch it again on the Michael's YouTube channel. As we're about to begin this, please feel free to follow along and paint with Mandy, or sit back and relax and enjoy the class, and then you can watch the replay at a later date to complete the project. And I'd like to hand this project over to Mandy Peltier.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. I am excited to be back with another class. I've spent a lot of time with you this month, and I'm excited to spend yet another Tuesday with you all. And we have a coffee themed class today. I made the mistake of having coffee before this class. So if I'm really wired or misspeak a bunch, it's probably because of the caffeine. So I should have chose decaf, but I'm going to go ahead and share my other camera so we can get started today. All right. So, I always start with an overhead view just so you can quickly check the boxes, make sure you have everything you need. So I have a glass of water. I am using the Skechers pocket set. I have an artist palette. I have a graphite pencil and eraser for drawing the outline today, paper towel for blotting. I have 2 round brushes, a 4 and a 6. And then one special tool today, if you will, is a Winsor & Newton ProMarker watercolor marker. I have talked about these markers before in my June class, Just Peachy. We used an orange one. They come in this set, but you can also buy them individually. So this is the one we used for the Just Peachy class, but today we're using the indigo blue one. So if you want to learn more about these, I showed how you can do a gradient with them because they are a marker, but they're also watercolor. So you can draw on them and then further activate them with water and dilute them further. Today, we'll just be writing on the paper directly with the markers. So go back and watch that class if you want to learn more. I'm not going to do much demoing with this today other than using it to write on the lettering. And then I have a piece of 9 by 12 inch student grade Winsor & Newton paper that I've trimmed to be 8 by 10 in size. So this is the pad of paper that I used. Like I said, it is the student grade version. This particular project is somewhat loose. It's a type of project that while there is some detail in it and there is some values, you don't want to get super caught up in the details. You just want to sort of throw the paint on and not think too hard about it. So I'll hold up the piece a little bit closer that we'll be working on today. It is I Love You a Latte. I love all those cutesy quippy little sayings that are clever, and I'm always up for a good pun, if you will. So I'm excited about this project today. And I also want to say, as I was developing this project, I did make it in another color palette as well. So while today's project is very sepia toned, or monochrome, if you will, I also made it to where the saucer and the mug were turquoise in color. So while I'm not going to do this one with you all today, I just want to point out, you can also throw in a pop of color in there if you want. You can make it even a red cup and saucer or whatever color you want. But today we'll be doing the sepia one. And one reason for that is this project only needs 3 paints. And I know sometimes a lot of my students feel a little overwhelmed when I do 10 colors for a single class. And so this will be a very manageable class given that we're only going to be mixing 3 colors today. All right, so I have probably talked plenty about that. So we're going to get started today by drawing the outline. So I'm going to set some things aside other than what I need to draw the outline. And I might sound like a broken record to those of you who attend my classes regularly, but I strongly recommend you transfer the outline before the class if you cannot all manage it, because I do have to sketch pretty quickly to squeeze everything into the hour we have. So we have 3 circles to draw, and each circle is going to progressively get smaller So help me, I meant to put it on the supply list and I forgot. But what you can do is you can just go grab like a cereal bowl. This is 5.5 inches or so in diameter, and you can just place it on your paper and trace around it. And then you could grab a coffee mug and you could do the same with the coffee mug and trace around the coffee mug. So I'm not going to do that today because I forgot to put it on the supply list. So I'm not going to cheat if you guys can't cheat. So I am just going to freehand draw the circles today. So this first circle, like I said, is about 5.5 inches in diameter. So I'm just going to draw a loose circle on the paper here, and then we can kind of go around it and fix what will not be a perfect circle and kind of make it look more perfect. So you can see right here, it's not perfect looking. And so I can sort of go around with my pencil and just sort of work my way around to sort of fix the circle. So you can also go grab a cereal bowl if you want right now while I'm sort of fixing this up. But I feel like drawing circles is a little bit easier than trying to draw an ellipse shape. So that's why we're doing a top-down view, even without having something to trace around. It's still a little bit easier to sort of fix it up and get a fairly perfect looking circle. So after you have your first big circle drawn, that will be for the saucer. The next 2 circles we're going to draw will be for the coffee cup, and particularly they will make up the rim of the coffee cup. So we'll draw the outer one first. That will serve as the outer rim of the coffee cup. And this is about 1 inch in on all sides from the edges of the saucer. So I'm just going to sort of go about 1 inch in with my pencil and just draw little circles all the way around about 1 inch in, and then I can just sort of play connect the dots. So when you were a kid, you'd get those little connect the dot books where they're numbered. Well, I'm sort of like making my own here by just putting dots 1 inch in from the saucer. And then I can go around and I can connect the dots and create another circle. And if this one is not perfect, you can do the same thing that I did with the saucer. We can kind of just draw little arches and turn and work around and sort of make it look good. And this is why I recommend you transfer before class, because I do this so fast and I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed. So these classes might feel a little less overwhelming if you transfer the outline prior. All right, so the third circle we're going to draw is only about 1/8 of an inch from the last circle we drew, and it'll be the inside rim of the coffee mug. So I don't need to draw dots for this because I'll just be drawing basically a parallel line that's only 1/8 of an inch distance or so from that outer ring that we drew for the coffee cup itself or coffee mug. So I'm just drawing little arches, twisting as I go to kind of apply these lines using the same angle. It kind of helps me maintain control and get it more accurate. But if you have something that works better for you, you go for it. This is just what works for me. It's just twisting, twisting, twisting. And then we'll draw the rest of the details from there. Hopefully you guys can see my graphite lines a little bit better over the camera today. I'm actually using an HB pencil. Normally I use an F. So this is darker than normal. All right, so next, let's go ahead and draw the cinnamon stick, because the cinnamon stick is in front of the foam design. So let's go ahead and draw the cinnamon stick. So the cinnamon stick, we're going to draw 3 lines. 2 of them are going to be the same size and parallel to each other. And the third line is parallel, but it's slightly shorter than the first 2 lines. So I'm going to start my first line, maybe 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the saucer. And I'm going to bring it down to go just into the liquid of the coffee. And then I'll maybe do 1/4 of an inch spacing and draw a second line that is the same length. And then my third line will end about 1/4 of an inch before the first 2 lines ended. So we have 3 lines, 2 that are the same, 1 that is about 1/4, maybe 1/8 of an inch smaller. And those first 2 lines that are the same length, I'm going to draw a little arch to connect the bottom. And I'm also going to draw an arch from that third line to connect to the second line, about 1/4 of an inch up. And then I can erase the graphite lines that show in between the cinnamon stick from those 2 circles I drew for the rim of the coffee cup. And then for the top of the cinnamon stick, I think this shape here kind of looks like a heart, only it doesn't meet at a point. It curves instead of meeting at a point. So I'm going to draw just sort of a curved heart shape on the top of the cinnamon stick. And then what's inside the cinnamon stick, this is sort of like a little flourish or a spiral. So on the left side, we're going to do sort of a spiral and then bring it around and then do almost like a teardrop shape to bring it back up to that arch. So a spiral and then bring it up on itself. So a spiral and then like a teardrop shape is what I'm going to kind of refer to it as. So I'll pull that up so you can see. Put my hand there so it focuses. So like a spiral and then bring it up to kind of look like a teardrop. And then we'll be ready to draw the foam design. So you can do whatever foam design you want. I've done a few other coffee projects where I did more of a flower shape in the middle, but today we're doing a heart. So I'm going to start by drawing the main heart that's right in the middle of the coffee mug. So this one, you can bring a point at the bottom. It's not curved along the bottom like the cinnamon stick shape. And then I'm going to draw another heart around that one. And if you touch the cinnamon stick, don't go over the cinnamon stick. Just pretend like the foam design is tucked behind the cinnamon stick. And you can end with just 2 hearts, or you can just sort of work your way all around. However much foam design you want is sort of up to you. This is your design. Honestly, if you look at the one I'm showing you today and the teal one I first did, the foam design on this one is a little bit more pronounced than this one. And what I end up doing for you today may end up looking more like this. It turns out different every time with the technique I'm going to show you. But it's still the same outline regardless. And then I'm going to do maybe a couple up here. That's the fun thing about these loose projects is they turn out a little bit differently each time. Okay, so now let's do the handle of the coffee mug. We haven't done that yet. So this is basically just a curved line that kind of connects back onto the rim. You start at the rim, draw a little arch, and then bring it back up. And you can place the handle anywhere. It doesn't have to be right here. If you want to put it right on the side or up here, it doesn't really matter because this is a top-down perspective. So the handle could really be anywhere. And then we're going to draw as many coffee beans as you want. So these are just sort of a jelly bean shape or a kidney bean shape with a subtle S-shaped curve or line running through the middle of them. So I'm just going to draw what I see on my actual outline here. And I'm just going to draw some kidney bean shapes with a subtle S-shaped curve going right through the middle. And you can do it where some are overlapping. You don't have to do any that are overlapping. You can just space them all out so they kind of stand alone if that's going to be easier for you. But you can draw as many as you want. I'm going to follow my photo reference here though. And you'll be surprised, the coffee beans are easier than they might look. This project is really just about getting the values right because we're only mixing 3 colors, but they're all shades of brown. So we're basically just going to be doing a value exercise today. All right, so last thing is the lettering. So how I approach lettering, what I'm going to do is right in the middle of the saucer, I'm going to draw a light line down that sort of splits the middle of the paper, because this will sort of help me with spacing. So it's a light line. You may not be able to see it over the camera, but I just drew it right from the middle bottom of the saucer down to the bottom edge of the paper. And the reason why I do this is because I kind of count, or I do this. So I count the number of characters, including spaces. And if it's an odd number, that middle odd letter or space is what I'm going to put directly on the line. If it's an even number, then the characters that are right in the middle, I put on each side of the line. So we have both examples today. So I love you is an even number. Counting the spaces, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I am going to put the V and the E, the V just to the left of the line I drew and the E just to the right. And it's going to help me space everything out evenly. So I am going to put the V just to the left of the line, the E just to the right. And then I'm going to go ahead and write the word U, although the letter U is also in the word U. And then I can go backwards and finish up love and write the I. And you'll see how that gets it perfectly centered by sort of following that rule that I set for myself. And a latte has an odd number. So the A is, or odd characters. So the A is the odd character. And so A is going to go directly on that line I just drew. I'm just going to draw it directly on that center line. And then I'm going to go ahead and write the other letters. So if you're freehand drawing your lettering, this can just be a good trick to use. Otherwise, you can do what I do sometimes, where I just erase and rewrite, erase and rewrite until I get it right. But this is a way to maybe get it right the first time. All right. So there is our outline. And of course, if you can see any of that, if you did the line approach like I did, you can erase that if you need to. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside now because we're done with the outline. And we're going to start before we mix our colors today. We'll just go ahead and write on the lettering. So again, I'm not going to do any demoing with this today because I did in the Just Peachy class in June, but I will just point out these markers come with 2 tips. It comes with just a traditional marker tip, and it comes with a brush lettering tip for if you want to thicken your downstrokes or just do fancier lettering. I'm just going to use the regular marker tip today, and I'm just going to go over each letter one time. So I'm just going to carefully, with the regular marker tip, just go over each letter with one layer of this watercolor marker. And so you'll see this is really fast. You can also paint it on that teal coffee cup example I showed you. I painted the lettering on that one, but the one we're doing today, I wrote it on with this marker. So either way is going to give you a very similar result, only the watercolor marker is quite a bit faster. There we go. I love you a latte. And then we are ready to mix our colors. All right, so I'm going to set this aside for just a second here, and I'm going to pull down my watercolor supplies. I'm going to mix my paint palette with the number 4 today. All right, so I'm going to stick my number 4 in the water, swish it around, get those bristles wet and evenly moist. I'm going to use my brush as if it were a spoon, and I'm going to place 3 scoops of water into 3 different wells on my palette, just like this. 1 scoop, 2 scoops, 3 scoops. I'm going to do the same to 2 more wells on my palette. And the first color we're going to mix is a light brown. The second will be a medium brown, and the third will be a dark brown. So we're going to have a light value, a middle value, and a dark value. So the first color, the light brown, we're going to mix, making equal number of passes using yellow ochre, burnt umber, and Chinese white. So equal passes. I may end up adding an extra pass of Chinese white if I feel like it's not light enough. But when I say equal passes, we're going to do 2 passes of each. So 2 of yellow ochre, 2 of burnt umber, 2 of Chinese white. So by pass, I mean you're going to take your wet brush. I'll start with yellow ochre. I'm going to run it into the yellow ochre a handful of times. And then I'm going to stir it into the first well with 3 scoops of water and wipe it on the edge of the palette. That's 1 pass. So when I say 2 passes of each, that means I need to do 1 more pass of yellow ochre, 2 passes of burnt umber, 2 passes of Chinese white. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to talk to you about the color white as I mix this first color here. And that's because sometimes I have students who are like, well, I don't use white. If I want to get a lighter value, I just dilute it with water. And yeah, you can do that. But with a lot of my projects, I really like to have equal paint to water ratios for everything that I mix. And so white allows me to get the right value that I want while also maintaining the same integrity of a paint to water ratio. So if I were to make this first light brown using just yellow ochre and burnt umber and then diluting it with water to get the right value, I would more than likely, well, not more than likely, I would have a different paint to water ratio for this one without white than I would for my other 2 paint colors. So that's why I like to use white. It gets me the right value and it also helps me maintain the correct paint to water ratio. So I ended up adding 3 passes of white, but it kind of depends on your pressure if you'll be good with just 2 passes or if you'll need to add a 3rd pass. But you'll see this really gives you a nice sort of camel tan coffee color brown for our light value. And you don't need to worry about rinsing your brush today in between colors because we're going to have a pretty cohesive palette that's just going to be a couple value steps down for each new color that we mix. So we have our light value. For our middle value, I'm just going to go ahead and stir my brush into the next well on my palette. And I'm only going to add to it burnt umber. So I'm probably going to add 5 or so passes of burnt umber, maybe 6. We want at least equal, I cannot speak, it's the coffee, I'm telling you, equal paint to water ratio, or even slightly more paint than water. So I'm just adding burnt umber to this second well on our palette to get our middle value. So you can see there's a significant value difference between the light brown and the middle brown. So if they look too close together, you're going to want to add more burnt umber. And then the third color we're going to mix is our dark value, and it's going to be a dark brown. So you can go ahead and stir your brush into the third well on your palette. And I'm going to add 3 passes of burnt umber, the same brown we've been using, to the third well on my palette, but I'm going to add a couple passes of ultramarine blue to it. And that's going to turn it a dark brown. If it looks black, you need to add more brown, because you can also mix black with this color combination. It just sort of depends on the ratio you use. But if it still looks too close to this second color we mixed, you need to add more blue. So we want it to look like a dark brown. So you might need to do more than a couple passes of blue. I'm on my third one here, and I think I even need to go with a 4th. So my guess is none of you will mix black today, because you'll need to add a fair amount of blue to make that happen. But you just want it to be a distinct value difference from light to middle to dark value. All right, so that's going to be what helps bring in, still keeping this finished project loose, but with enough detail and values to give it some realism. All right. So hopefully that wasn't too tricky mixing our colors today. The good news is it's just these 3 colors we're working with, and you shouldn't have to mix any more paint today than what we've mixed here. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this around, adjust my work surface here. I can pull over my outline, and I'll pull this in so you can always see the finished work as we go. And we're kind of going to be working all over today, so you're going to need to bear with me. We'll kind of work on the foam, and then we'll move to the cinnamon stick, and we may come back to the foam. So we're kind of going to be hopping all over the place. But this is a fairly quick thing to paint, so we shouldn't have time finishing it before our hour is over. So I'm going to continue with my number 4 brush. I'm going to go ahead and just give it a rinse and blot it on my paper towel just to make sure I'm starting with a clean brush. And I'm going to start with the light brown, put some light brown on my brush. I always wipe it on the well a couple of times to release excess paint. And I'm going to use the tip of my number 4, and I'm just going to go over the graphite lines that I drew on for the foam design. So I'm going to go over the heart graphite lines for the foam design. So we're just going to work on the foam design here for a second, and only add paint to your brush if you absolutely need to. Try and go as far as you can with the amount of paint you loaded on your brush, because this will also help us get some different values going, even with just this one singular color. So you can see I'm just kind of working all the way. I have not yet loaded my brush. I'm on the 3rd heart here, and I still have some paint on my brush. So just go as far as you can. But if you have to load your brush, by all means do it. And just be careful not to add paint to the coffee rim yet, because we're not ready to add paint to that. All right, so I've gone over all of the graphite lines for the foam design. And with what's left on my brush, I might even add a few more swirls that weren't actually on the outline, but that are following the curve of the foam design. So just wherever you want, you can paint on some more lines, some more swirls. Might put one right through the middle of the heart. Just follow the curve of the foam design as you apply these lines so that it looks natural. And I'll hold this up in a second here. You really can't get this wrong. It just kind of depends on how white you want your foam design to look, or how much kind of coffee or espresso you want to infiltrate it. Let me put my fingers under the camera so it focuses. See how I added some extra little swirls and designs there. So I'm using the student grade paper because it works really well for what I'm going to do next. And don't fret if you're like, what is she doing? So to kind of help cover some of the white of the paper and to soften the lines that I just painted on, I'm going to now cover this whole section with water. And that's not going to fully lift what I have painted on, but it is going to soften it and kind of give some of that tan color, that soft tan color to the parts that still just show the white of the paper. So I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to put it in the water. You can wipe it a couple times. And I'm just literally going to sort of go over each section. And if you kind of run your brush in sort of a back and forth scrubbing motion, it will start to pick up some of the paint as it reactivates some of the paint that's on the paper. And it will sort of fill in the white of the paper without actually erasing what you've already painted on. As you can see on mine, I'm adding lots of water here, but it's not fully lifting, not even close to what I've already painted on. And I like the student grade paper because it absorbs the paint really fast. So it does work well for a technique like this. If you're using like a really rough watercolor paper that absorbs the paint much more slowly, you might have more of a blobby mess than what I'm able to achieve right now with the student grade paper. But you can see how it still shows a lot of those lines I painted on, actually all of them, but there's also now a really soft tan or cream color to the rest of the foam design. And as we apply the other colors, even that soft tan color, the lightest values we see here will look white compared to all the other values we're going to put on. All right, so I hope that makes sense. And then
Mandy, I'm going to make one comment for just let everybody know that make sure that you're using a watercolor brush when you're doing this, because that's how Mandy's able to capture the water. It holds the water and allows you to spread it out. You have to make sure you're using a watercolor brush for the process.
As opposed to something for a different medium. Yes,
like an acrylic or an
yes.
oil. Yeah, you really need that round brush and the bellow in there where it really absorbs the water and acts as a way to move it around. So you really need the watercolor brush.
Yes, good point, Tim. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to continue with my light brown. Believe it or not, most of this project is light brown. So I'm going to put some more on my 4. And I'm going to add this color all the way around the inside rim. Actually, just to this whole outer part where it's just the solid color of coffee. So I'm just going to apply it to whatever's left on the outside of the foam design. And some of it may bleed into that water you just applied. That's okay. Allow that to happen because we're going to be doing a lot of like adjustments and scrubbing today to sort of help create some texture on our coffee. But I like to turn my artwork as I go. It kind of helps me maintain control, especially as I'm kind of working along the edges, these curved edges. And if you watch my previous classes with circular shapes, I do this in all my classes because it just helps me maintain control to just kind of rotate as I go and always work from the same angle. Just working my way around, just filling in what's left of the coffee inside the mug. Okay, and then while that is still somewhat wet, don't even worry about cleaning your brush. I'm going to just put the tip of it into my middle color brown, my middle value, and I'm going to apply this just to the inside edges of the coffee mug. So not to the rim itself, just where the edge of the coffee touches the rim. And I'm going to apply that middle value brown to it. So once again, I'm going to be rotating my work here as I go, help me maintain control. It's okay if the thickness is different all the way around. That's just going to add some realism to your work here. And so you'll see this brown, in some parts, it just bleeds really nicely into that soft brown. In other places, it doesn't. But before I show you how we can fix that, I'm going to take whatever of that middle brown is still in my brush, and I'm going to apply a little bit of it to the foam design. Maybe to 25% of it or so. I'm just going to indiscriminately, I'm really not thinking about it. I'm just going over some of the graphite lines on the foam design with this now slightly darker brown. It's up to you really how much of it you want to apply, but I like to gradually add color to the foam design versus doing it all at once. I just like to gradually make some adjustments and add a little bit, add a little bit more, add a little bit more. You may even want to add more than what we're able to put on during the class today, because I just need to be mindful of time. But you really can't add too much color to the foam design as long as it still looks like a lighter value compared to the rest of the coffee mug. That's really going to be your goal, is this should be lighter than all of the coffee that's out around the foam design itself. So how you can kind of soften the brown ring though, the inside rim, if you wanted to, and it will also create a little more texture to your coffee itself. So you can take your brush and rinse it in your water glass, wipe it several times, and then you can just sort of scrub along the edge of the coffee, and that will soften it and even create a little bit of texture into that lighter brown we've already applied. This is optional, but I think it adds some nice texture, because again, this is just supposed to be kind of loose. This is really one of those projects you just really don't want to think too hard about. So this is a good class to try and do with me, because you don't have the time to think too hard about it. You just have to keep up, and that will give you a better outcome than trying to fuss with it and be perfect. So, and then we'll come back later. We'll tackle more of the foam design if we need to make some adjustments. But for now, let's go ahead and apply the first layer of color to the cinnamon stick and to the coffee beans. We'll start with the cinnamon stick, and I'm just going to apply an even layer of the light brown to the cinnamon stick, to the whole thing. I'm still using my number 4 brush. All right, so number 4 brush, and I'm just loading it with the tip of my brush, because I literally just need enough to paint on the cinnamon stick. I don't want to have globs of paint sitting on the cinnamon stick, just enough to cover it. And the same with the coffee beans. I'm just going to dip just the tip of it into the light brown when I need more paint, because the coffee beans are small. You don't need much paint to cover them. And you see I'm doing this pretty fast. There's even some parts of the paper still kind of peeking through the cinnamon, or the coffee beans rather, and I'm not going to worry about it, because that's going to do me a favor in a little bit here. Help just with the values. So after you have a layer of light brown to each coffee bean, I'm going to take my brush underneath each coffee bean, and I'm just going to run it under each one to create a cast shadow. And because we have the graphite lines underneath, you'll still be able to distinguish the coffee bean from the cast shadow. But we're going to be adding all 3 browns under the coffee beans to kind of gradually build up the cast shadows. I can hold that up so you can see. But I just ran my brush under each one to just give it a light cast shadow. And I just used what was still on my brush. Just give you guys a second here. I know I do this a lot faster than you guys, because I've been practicing this for so long. So it's old hat to me, but this is the first time for you. So I want to be mindful of that. But I'll tell you what we're going to do next. What we're going to do next is I want to add yet another layer of the middle brown to the inside rim of the coffee mug, because we just want to gradually build up the coffee, and this layer we've already applied is already dried, so we're good to add another layer. And we're going to add a second layer to the cinnamon stick and a second layer to the coffee beans, and we're going to do it all with that middle brown color. So I'll go ahead and start. Tip of my brush into the middle brown, and I'm just going to run it along the inside edge of the coffee again. So this is now wet on dry, because that first layer should be dry, or at least mostly dry. If it's wet on wet in some areas, that's okay. Again, it's just going to add to the texture of your coffee. I don't know if any of you guys have a little coffee nook in your house, but I think people who have coffee nooks, it's always so cute. And we have a little coffee area, but I don't know that I have it decorated super cute. So I think something like this would be really cute to put in a little coffee nook area. And then once again, I can clean my brush, wipe it several times on the rim of my glass, and then just run it along that edge to kind of help it transition into the rest of the coffee, and even just create a little bit more texture. You can add more water to your brush however often you need. I'm always twisting. You guys are going to get dizzy if you're just watching this class today versus trying to do it with me, since I'm twisting as I go. All right, so to the cinnamon stick, still keeping with the middle brown, I am going to apply it just to the right of the middle graphite line to create a little bit of depth there. So I'm going to apply it just to the right. I'm going to apply it along the left side of the cinnamon stick and along the right side of the cinnamon stick. So just basically on the 3 graphite lines, but the middle one just to the right of the graphite line. And I'm also going to apply it to those 2 bottom arches I drew on. I'm going to add it to that swirl. So just use the very tip of your brush. And then I'm going to paint in that little teardrop shape. And then finally, I'll run it along the graphite line for that curved heart at the top of the cinnamon stick. Just like that. So you're basically just outlining for the most part the graphite lines, with the one exception of that middle line, you're going to apply it just to the right. And if you want, you can, with what's left on your brush, just add a few wispy vertical lines to each half of the cinnamon stick. And those will be softened later, but you can add in a little bit of color there by just drawing some thin wispy lines on each half. And then to the coffee beans, I am going to, this is going to feel tricky, use the very, very tip of your brush. These round brushes have a very sharp, not sharp, but like very pointed tip. And so I'm going to use that pointed tip to paint on 2 really thin lines along each side of the graphite line on the coffee beans. So I'm going to paint on one just to the right of the graphite line and one just to the left of the graphite line to leave just a real thin amount of the light brown that we first applied. And this is going to start to build up the shape and the depth of the coffee beans. And I'm going to do that to every single coffee bean. I'm going to draw a thin line just to the right and just to the left of the graphite line. You really don't need much paint on your brush, like just the very tip of your brush into the paint to paint on these 2 diagonal lines. And you know what, if you accidentally cover the whole graphite line, don't worry about it, because we're going to go in with a thin line of dark brown. So all is not lost. It'll be fine. Just try your best to do thin lines that are parallel to each other and leave just a little space in between, just like this here. And then with this same brown color, I'm going to add another cast shadow underneath each coffee bean. I may cover all of the initial light brown color that I applied. I may not. It's not my goal to try and cover the light brown. I'm just applying another layer. And if it covers all of it, it covers all of it. If it doesn't, great. Just another line of the middle brown as a cast shadow to each coffee bean. And then I think we'll be ready to start on the saucer itself. So I think working on the saucer is fun. I think it's kind of therapeutic. It's almost like, a way to relieve stress or something, the technique we're going to use. So I'm not going to use my number 4 brush though for the saucer. I'm going to use my 6. And I haven't used my 6 yet, so I'm just going to swish it real quick in my water, get those bristles wet, blot it on my paper towel. And we're going to use the light brown. And I'm going to start by applying it to the entire outer rim of the coffee mug. So not to the rim itself, just the other side of the rim. So I'm going to apply it all the way along the rim, just the top of the mug handle, just along the top of the mug handle, not to the mug handle itself, but just along the top. So all the way around the rim and to the top of the mug handle with the light brown. So you can kind of watch me if you're not sure. So I'm not going to worry about thickness of my stroke. It can be thin, it can be thick, it can be a mixture of the 2. I'm more just worrying about precision, just not applying any paint yet on the rim of the coffee mug. So you can see this is all thick and different thicknesses and strokes. I'm just working my way around the outer rim of the coffee mug. And then I'll apply it just to the top of the handle as well, like I said, just to the top of the handle. And then continue along the bottom of the rim here, like so. And this is where it might seem weird, but don't worry, trust me. I'm going to put a little bit more light brown on my brush, and I'm just going to start applying strokes and different thicknesses and sizes around the saucer. I probably don't want to cover more than 30% of the saucer in doing this. So I'm going to just sort of follow this as a guide. So I'm going to apply maybe like a real thick one along here. You can apply some thin ones along the rim, but I'm literally just applying some random strokes along the saucer and the edge of the saucer. again, I don't want to cover more than maybe 30%. And you'll see why in a second, because the more brown you add, the more brown your saucer is going to look, because we're going to activate everything we're applying here and smooth it out and create some texture. But almost done here. I don't want to add too much. Okay, I think I'll stop there. So this way you can see what I did here. So I didn't really think about it. I just applied strokes in random places all around the saucer, just a little bit along the edging, some through the middle. This kind of looks like the letter Y, whereas these just look like thick lines. So it doesn't really matter what you do, just 30% is the goal. And then just as we did to the center foam design, I'm going to place my brush in the water and wet my brush, wipe it a few times, and then I'm just going to start scrubbing. I'm literally going to go over everything I just painted on, and you'll see it's not going to erase it, but it's going to start to soften it as I go. You really just need to be careful around the coffee beans and the cinnamon stick. But even if this is not really picking up, it's just kind of wetting, but as the water sort of settles into what I already painted on, I can go back over it in a second and it will lift more of it and soften more of it. So I'm just going to sort of go all the way around, careful around those coffee beans though. And I'm scrubbing with my brush. I'm not using heavy pressure. I'm kind of using a wiping motion, and even my wrist is kind of doing most of the work here in the scrubbing. If you kind of look at me, I'm kind of doing this with my wrist versus this, or how I'm not doing this. I'm not using my fingers. I'm more using my wrist to do the activating, and then just be careful around the coffee beans. And just remember, if one doesn't lift quite as much as you want, it will be covered with water, move on to another section, and then you can come back after the water has sort of reactivated it a bit by sitting on top of the paint. And you'll see how this just kind of creates some cool texture in kind of a fun way. And just add as much water as you need to get the job done, and as much scrubbing as you need to get the job done. And you can always add a little bit more color too after you do the first go round. If you decide, well, I didn't quite add enough paint, you can always make adjustments by adding a little bit more paint to the saucer to kind of get the look you want or the texture you want. But I just think this is fun. This is where I say it's almost like therapeutic. You could probably get out a lot of your emotions onto this by just scrubbing, activating that paint. And I think art is therapy. I think it's wonderful that a lot of people have turned to art over the past year. I think it's really good for your mental health. Just a good creative outlet. Okay, so then I've done the first layer. You can see how it looks quite a bit like this already. I might add just a little bit more paint in certain spots, maybe a little bit more around the rim, just make some adjustments. Maybe a little bit more to here, so whatever you want. But if there's any parts that were kind of stubborn, then you can always just wet your brush and just keep going over them with more water, and they'll lift more and more the more you add water to them. But I think it's a lot of fun doing this. You really can't get it wrong, because even if you add more brown than 30%, it's still going to look great. You're still going to have a lot of texture on there. It just may end up being a little bit darker than what I have here, which is fine. But for the teal one, I mean, it's the same process. I just used 3 values of teal versus 3 values of brown. So you would just have 3 more colors to mix. You would just have to mix 3 teals, and then you'll basically apply the same process. All right, so hold that up so you can see. All right, and I want the saucer to dry for a second. So maybe I'll readdress the foam design, and I think I'll just apply sort of a little bit more of the light brown to the foam design and activate it with more water if I need to, just to give the saucer a second to dry before we address the rim and the handle. So I'm just doing the same thing I did the first time, where I'm just applying a little bit of the light brown, and then I'm running clean water over it to just sort of smooth it into the foam design. So again, you can do as much of this or as little of it as you want. It just kind of depends how light or dark you want your foam design to be. And you can always even reactivate once again what's already there to darken it even slightly a little bit more. All right, so I just did that for a second. It doesn't take long for the paint on this student grade paper to dry. So it's really good for something like this. I know I keep saying that, but it just always impresses me when I am working on the student grade paper. It really does have its benefits for certain uses. So, all right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply a layer of paint around the rim into the handle. So I'm only going to apply, I'm using my number 4 again, because we were just using the 6. So using my number 4 again, I'm going to apply the light brown just to the outer rim of the rim. So just to the outer rim of the rim. So you'll still have some white of the paper showing through on the right half of the rim all the way around. So just carefully apply just a thin layer of light brown to the outer rim of the rim, or the outer edge of the rim, might be a less confusing way to say it. So I'm just using the tip of my brush here to apply this to the outer rim. And try not to rest your hand on the wet saucer. Easier said than done, because I am doing it as I am telling you not to. All right, so apply it to the outer rim of the rim. And then after you have it applied to the entire outer rim of the rim, what I'm going to do is place my brush in the water, wipe it, and I'm going to apply water to what's left of the rim. And what I applied on the outside of the rim and what I'm now applying to still what's left of the white of the paper, it'll bleed gently into each other and create like a softer version of the light brown. So it'll be darker along the outer edge, a little bit lighter along the inside edge by doing this technique. And you can always scrub a little bit at the edges if it's being a little stubborn. You see the inside edge is a little bit lighter than the outside edge by using that technique. And to the handle, sorry for moving quick here. All right, so to the handle, I'm going to put more light brown on my brush. I'm going to apply it to the top of the handle where it touches the outside rim. I'm going to apply it a little bit through the middle. So just where it touches the outside rim into the middle. And I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to put my brush in the water, wipe it several times, and I'll fill in the rest of that handle with just the water and allow that light brown to bleed into the white of the paper. So now every single piece of our coffee has been covered with paint. And so now really it's just time to make adjustments with the dark brown color because we haven't yet used the dark brown color. So let's do that now. We'll make our final adjustments with the dark brown. So with the dark brown, I'm going to once again apply paint to the inside rim of the coffee. So where we've already applied light brown and the middle brown. So I'm just going to use the tip of my brush and I'm going to apply dark brown to the entire inside rim. Twist as you go if it helps you maintain control. And then I'll apply a little bit of this dark brown to the foam design too, but not a whole lot of it because we don't want the predominant color of the foam design to be the dark brown. And like this looks really dark over here. So I might even take my wet brush and just gently transition that by using that scrubbing motion on the edges that we talked about earlier. Okay, so to the foam design, I'll definitely apply some right to the middle, maybe some of the upper curves where it gets close to the actual espresso part of the coffee. I mean, really, you can apply as much as you want. I'm telling you not much, but this is your piece. If you want it to be a dark foam, you make it dark foam. This is your artwork here. All right, so, but this dark color will just really kind of help set everything in place. And you can always also, again, take a wet brush to just sort of smooth it out and help with transitions. Doesn't that look cool? I love how that looks. And you can always go back in with light brown if you want to do any other touch-ups. Like up here, I feel like this needs to be a little bit more of the light brown, not as white as it looks. So apply it and then use your wet brush to sort of smooth it all out. And I like how that looks. That looks awesome. Okay. You know what? I can be a perfectionist here, even though I'm telling you all not to be. I'm going to take some of that middle brown and just apply it to some of the coffee to kind of help that transition from the dark to the light. So I'm just kind of loosely brushing that on and then using the wet brush to sort of transition it in. And that to me, value wise, looks a lot better. All right. So just wanted to do that real quick, but you can make whatever adjustments you need to the cinnamon stick. I'm going to take the dark brown. I am going to apply it to the middle, same spot where I applied the middle brown. I'm going to apply it to that teardrop and the swirl. I'm going to apply it to the upper left of that heart-shaped curve and then the upper right of the heart-shaped curve. So we're just kind of adding some final details to help the cinnamon stick sort of stick out. And I might apply just a little bit along the left side, maybe a little bit along the right side, as well as to the arches. And then same thing, you can always take your wet brush and just sort of transition that in if you need to help it look a little bit more like a soft line, a soft cinnamon stick. You can always add more colors if you need to as well. If you need a little bit more of the middle brown, you do whatever you need to make it look good. But there's the cinnamon stick. And then I'm still fussing with this. Look at me. I'm telling you all not to do this and I'm doing it right in front of you. Do as I say, not as I do, right? That's the old saying. Okay, so for the coffee beans, we're going to apply a line straight through the middle where we did the graphite line using the dark brown, but don't worry about trying to cover all of the graphite line. To keep a real thin line, it's okay if it skips a little. That's just actually going to kind of help with the realism. And then we'll also ground each coffee bean with a cast shadow using the dark brown as well. So I'm going to put some dark brown on my brush. I'm going to run it along each kind of heart-shaped curve. And I can tell I'm going to need a bit more of that middle brown on each coffee bean, which is fine. We can make those final adjustments as well. So each one here, and you know, if the 4 is a little too thick for you to get really thin lines, you can always switch to a 0 or 1 or whatever size brush you need to kind of help you get those thin lines. And then I'm placing the cast shadow underneath each coffee bean. And after doing this, you'll see that the coffee beans really do need another layer of color. They blend in with the saucer a little bit too much. So I will clean my brush, blot it on my paper towel here. Put a little bit of the brown on my brush, and I'm just going to real loosely add color to the left and right of that dark brown graphite line. And then that really is going to be what kind of brings these coffee beans to life. And I will say, if you have any 2 coffee beans that are overlapping, like these 2 are, and these 2 are, the back of the 2 coffee beans really does need a little bit of the dark brown right where they touch and overlap to help with realism, because it's just going to be darker. The back coffee bean is going to be a little bit darker than the front coffee bean. So I'm adding a little bit of dark brown to the back of the 2 coffee beans that overlap to kind of help them stand out a little bit better. And you can always add even another thin cast shadow underneath each coffee bean to even ground them further, which is what I'm doing. Just these final adjustments, they may look different for you than they look for me, because all of our pieces are going to look a little bit different. And I also think the rim blends in a little bit too much to the saucer. Even though we did that initial layer of light brown all around, I'm looking at it, I'm like, that kind of blends in a little bit more than I would like. I want it to stand out more. So I can always take some of the middle brown and just apply it to some of the outer edge of the saucer. I don't even need to apply to all of it, maybe just to 50% or so. And even just applying it to 50% is going to kind of help it stand out. And then I can do the same thing where I take my wet brush and I just sort of run it along those lines to smooth them out. And you'll see how this really does sort of now help the coffee mug appear distinct from the saucer. I feel like I have not misspoken one time today, but if I watch the replay of this, I'm sure I'm going to catch times where I did, but I'm trying so hard today not to misspeak since I had that coffee before the class. Oh my goodness. And you better believe after this, I'm going to have another cup of coffee because how can you not be in the mood after painting this? Am I right? So, all right. So I think one other touch and then we'll be done. And then I have a couple of things to show you. All right. So I'm going to add a little bit more of that brown to the handle because I want the handle to be a little distinct from the rim. So I'm going to apply it once again where the handle meets the rim of the coffee mug. And this is the middle brown again, and maybe just a little bit down the middle. And then same thing, I'll wet my brush and then just sort of smooth. Ah, that looks nice. I like how that looks. I'll hold these up so you can see the one I did for you, the one that was the original one where I wasn't talking anyone's ear off as I was painting it. But I hope you had fun learning this particular project. It is fast and easy. I mean, I don't think we really started painting until 2:30 today, but you can always take your time. I know I went really fast, but don't take too much time because this is supposed to look loose and somewhat imperfect. So what I want to show you is I have a couple of classes coming up. I'll have 2 holiday themed classes, one in November, one in December. So the November one is November 16th. It's a Tuesday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's this Moose Lodge ski skate sled. So I'm going to show you how to do like a buffalo plaid design. It uses painter's tape to kind of help block off sections. So the supply list calls for 1.5 inch painter's tape, but you could also do 3/4 inch and just double up the strips of tape. So you could also do 3/4 inch like what I have right here. So I hope you'll join me for that. That'll be a lot of fun. And then I don't think I have ever done this before in any of my classes, but my class in December is going to involve Christmas cookies. And I don't have the finished design left, but what I want to show you is some of my drafts. So to develop these classes, it goes through this process where I create drafts, I submit them to Winsor & Newton. They give me feedback and we just sort of keep working until we find something that works. So this will be a treat. None of these will be the actual class. It'll be some variation of these drafts I'm showing you. But I started with this one with 7 cookies, baking spirits bright. This took me like 3 hours to paint. So there's no way we can do this in a class. So then I tried one with just 5 cookies. So I went from 7 to 5, still took a little too long. So I'm going to make another draft this week with just 3 cookies or maybe even just 1. But then I also made this one yesterday, totally different. Oh, snap, with these gingerbread men. So I don't know which of these you like the best or some combination of the 3, but I'm going to be doing some kind of Christmas cookie class in December, which I'm really excited about. So let me go ahead and share my other camera so I can say goodbye to you all. But I also, if you were able to keep up with me today, if you painted along with me, I would love to see how your latte artwork ended up. If you want to hold it up so I can see. Oh, these look great. I love all the smiles that I'm seeing too. These look awesome. Good job, guys. And I think this would make a really good Valentine's Day project too, don't you? Because it has the heart in the latte and it says, I love you, a latte. So I think this is a good project that's good for any time of year, not just when it's getting cold outside and you want something cozy, but wow, everyone I'm seeing looks just really so amazing. So good. That's awesome. All right. Well, Tim, unless you have anything to say, I just want to thank you all for being here today and hope to see you at my Moose Lodge class on November 16th.
Thank you, everyone.